Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Haribol, Jai. Huh?
Do you want to share any?
We'll do a little bit of budget. Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhu. That was very nice. Here. I think that's enough. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for coming tonight to our regular Sunday program. And we're very fortunate to have so many wonderful youth devotees like Mataji that just sang. Her name is Shrestha, and she's a very wonderful devotee. She sings beautifully. She's a wonderful artist. She is very knowledgeable in Krishna consciousness, and she's grown up in this community. So thank you very much, Shrestha. So this is a Bengali bhajan, and it says, out of compassion for the fallen souls, Sri Krishna Chaitanya came to this world with his personal associates and divine abode to teach Saranagati, surrender to the Almighty Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, and to freely distribute ecstatic love of God, which is ordinarily very difficult to obtain. This Saranagati is the very life of the true devotee. The ways of Saranagati are humility, dedication of the self, acceptance of the Lord as one's only maintainer, faith that Krishna will surely protect one, execution of only those acts favorable to pure devotion, and renunciation of conduct adverse to pure devotion. The youthful son of Nanda Maharaj, Sri Krishna, hears the prayers of anyone who takes refuge in him by the sixfold practice. Bhaktivinoda places a straw between his teeth, prostrates himself before the two Goswamis, Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatana, and clasps their lotus feet with his hands. I am certainly the lowest of men, he tells them weeping, but please make me the best of men by teaching me the ways of Saranagati. So Saranagati, of course, in Sanskrit means surrendering to the Lord. And there's 6 favorable attitudes that one can assume in order to surrender. And first is humility. And second is dedication of the self to serving the Lord. And third is acceptance of the Lord as one's only maintainer. So the first principle, humility, is spoken of as anukulyena, accepting everything favorable for spiritual life. And the second principle is, when it says dedication of the self, that means that one gives up pratikulyena, gives up everything not good for spiritual life, and everything that is against the principles of service to God. And then number 3 is accepting Krishna as their only protector and depending completely on the mercy of the Lord. And then there is the acceptance of the Lord as one's only maintainer. In other words, we are not in anxiety about maintaining body and soul together or maintaining the family. One works honestly and depends completely on the mercy of Krishna. And number 4 is that execution of only those acts that are Krishna conscious. In other words, having no other interest in life other than pleasing the Lord through one's unselfish acts of devotion. And then finally, to act always with gentleness and humility and being surrendered to the Lord in every act that one performs. So this is called saranagati, surrendering unto the Lord. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jivedoya Kori Swaprashada Sriyadama Sava Avatari. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jivekura Kori Swaprashada Sriyadama Sava Avatari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Adyanta Dulabha Prema Kori Baradana Sikaya Saranagati Bhaktira Prana. Adyanta Dulabha Prema Kori Baradana Sikaya Saranagati Bhaktira Prana. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jivedoya Kori Swaprashada Sriyadama Sava Avatari.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jivedaya Kori Swaprashada Sriyadama Sava Avatari.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Dainya Atmani Vedana Gotrite Varana Avasya Raksibe Krishna Viswasa Pralana. Danya Atmani Vedana Goptrite Varana Avasya Rakshibe Krishna Viswasa Palana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Bhakti Anukula Matra Karyera Srikara, Bhakti Pratikula Bhava Varjanangikara. Bhakti Anukulya Macha Karyera Svikara Bhakti Pratikula Bhava Varjanangikara. Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Sadanga Saranagati Hoy Bejahara Tahara Patana Suneshi Nanda Kumara. Sadanga Saranagati Hoy Bejahara Tahara Patana Suneshi Nanda Kumara. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jive Doya Kori Swaprasada Sriya Dhamma Sava Avatari.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jive Doya Kori Swaprasada Sriya Dhamma Sava Avatari.
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Rama Hare Hare. Rupa Sanatana Pade Dante Chinakori Bhakati Vinoda Pode Dun Padadori. Rupa Sanatana Pade Dante Chinakori Bhakati Vinoda Dwade Dun Padadori. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare.
Kandiya Bole Amito Adama Shikaya Saranagati Koro Eutama. Kandiya Bole Amito Adama Shikaya Saranagati Koro Eutama. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Bola Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Tagore Premanandi Ki Jai. So Lord Krishna explains what it means to be in a state of saranagati, surrender to the will of the Lord. The whole purpose of spiritual knowledge is to learn how to relate to God in our lifetime. Because of the modern materialistic culture, we don't take God seriously in our life. And because of that, we're always troubled by difficulties. Therefore, Krishna comes himself. He came himself 5,000 years ago, and he spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna so that humanity could understand how to surrender to the Lord and be protected by the Lord and eventually go back to where we came from. We have all originally were in the spiritual world, but because we are endowed with limited free will, we chose voluntarily to walk away from Krishna. Now, that's hard to believe, but it's a fact, because whatever we did originally, we still do today. Therefore, most people do not take the existence of God seriously. They are more interested in material goals in life rather than a spiritual goal. However, when Krishna came 5,000 years ago, Arjuna was in a very difficult situation. He was on a battlefield, and the war was going to start very soon, and he became confused. He did not know what to do because he had family on both sides of that battle. He had his immediate family on one side and his extended family on the other side. So that's very bewildering for someone, especially someone like Arjuna, who was a genuine devotee. He did not consider killing his uncles and grandfather and close relatives something that was desirable to do. How could he kill Bhisma Pitamaha, who was the godfather in the entire Kuru dynasty? How could he kill his own guru, Dronacharya, who taught him how to fight and how to engage in war and battle? So, and then on his side, it was his brothers and other close members of his family. So on both sides, he had family members, and therefore he became paralyzed emotionally. How could he, if he won the battle, he would kill one side of the family. If he lost the battle, the other side of the family would be dead. So therefore, although he was very close relative and friend of Krishna, he told Krishna, "I can't fight," and he threw his bow and arrow down on the ground. Now, however, he had the good sense to tell Krishna, "I cannot fight, but I want to accept you now, not as a member of my family, not as a close member or a friend. I want to accept you as my guru, and I want you to tell me what is right and wrong in this very difficult situation." So sometimes all of us are in such a dilemma where we're not sure exactly what to do, and if we do one thing, we're going to hurt one person that we love. If we do another thing, we're going to hurt another person that we love. So what do? We become paralyzed emotionally. So, but Arjuna said, "Look, I want to surrender myself. I want you to be my guru, but I'm still throwing down my bow and arrow, and I'm refusing to fight." So at that point, Arjuna began to ask Krishna questions. And the questions he asked Krishna are the most important questions anyone could ask God if they met him personally. Just like Arjuna is with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's no longer considering him a relative, he's considering him as his guru. Guru means someone who has knowledge of God and can explain it very directly and without any ambiguity. So Arjuna wanted to know, what is the right thing for me to do in this very dire situation? So Krishna began to explain to him by first explaining what's called Atma Tattva, knowledge of the eternal soul. Most of us, although theoretically we might hear about I have an eternal soul, we don't really understand what that means. That means that we were all originally with Krishna. We are all expanded from Krishna himself. Just like you get married and you have children. So those children are an expansion of the mother and father. And they completely depend on the mother and father in their younger age. And then as they grow older, they begin to explore the world, to try and understand who they are, what is their purpose in life. And sometimes they separate themselves from the mother and father. So we see how in life, due to whatever influences we have through association with others, we can develop even hatred of our parents. It happens a lot nowadays. Or we can be very connected to our parents. So in this case, Arjuna, because he was faced with a very serious problem, he had at least the composure of the mind to think, I should have a guru, someone who is an expert in Krishna consciousness, and let him explain to me what is the right thing to do. So Krishna begins by explaining about the eternality of the soul. So if we go to the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Dehinosmin yata dehe komaran yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir diras patranamuyate. He says that as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So now he's beginning to explain what is the difference between the soul and the body. We have an eternal soul, but we have the tendency to fall into illusion due to association with the material nature. The material nature is made up of three supernatural forces. They're called sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva means the quality of goodness, and rajas means the quality of passion, and tamas means the quality of ignorance. These supernatural forces control all of our activities in life. We might not understand how that's happening, but when you analyze different emotions that we have, then we can see that sometimes we're acting in the mode of goodness, sometimes we're acting in the mode of passion, and sometimes we're acting in the mode of ignorance. Ignorance means being lazy and eating meat and taking intoxicants, etc. And the mode of passion means working very hard, but mainly to gain money and spend the money for pleasing our own senses. And then the mode of goodness is having self-control and trying to understand our relationship with God. So we have these three different forces that are influencing our life. Like, for example, when you go to sleep, you're in the mode of ignorance. You're not conscious, except for sometimes dreaming. Dreaming does not happen in deep sleep. It happens when we are almost awake or almost asleep. And then the mode of passion is we want to work very, very hard and then earn money and mostly spend that money on pleasing ourselves or pleasing our family members. And then the mode of goodness is we learn to be regulated in our different activities of the day, meaning eating at the same time every day, going to sleep at the same time every day, waking up at the same time every day. That regulated mode of life, which was originally strictly followed in India. In other words, people before the light bulb, the light bulb was one of the things that changed society very quickly. The light bulb meant that they could stay up later at night, but before the light bulb, mostly whenever the sun went down, people would go to sleep. And before the sun would come up, they would wake up in what's called Brahma Muhurta. 3 hours before the sunrise. And during that time, they would engage in spiritual activities, especially chanting mantras, such as the Vishnu Sahasranam Sotram, or as Lord Chaitanya recommended 500 years ago, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So this type of life was very, very nice. And families stayed together. Sometimes there would be 3-4 generations in the family. They were all regulated to have spiritual life and at the same time maintain themselves, and mostly they were self-sufficient. Most people lived in villages, and they learned to be self-sufficient, growing their own food, having their own cows and having fresh milk, and going regularly on a daily basis to the temple. The temple was the main building in the village, and the whole social life of the people was in the temple. And they would hear Ramayana, or they would hear Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Mahabharata, and they would be hearing every day, and then they would chant bhajans like we just chanted the bhajan that had spiritual significance. And they would also hear the discourses of holy persons or sadhus. And in this way, they had a very simple life. They had close family relationship. They were basically engaged in maintaining themselves and at the same time developing spiritual knowledge to live a life of sattva guna, goodness. Now, sattva guna is necessary in order, or the mode of goodness is necessary to begin to understand spiritual knowledge. You cannot really understand spiritual knowledge when you're influenced by lust and greed and ignorance. It's only when one is serious about regulating their habits and putting aside time for spiritual elevation, especially the Brahma Muhurta period. So in order to do that, you have to go to sleep early and you have to wake up early. So this was a lifestyle. Of course, now many things have changed, especially due to outsourcing. In India, you have a lot of people that are awake all night long and go to sleep during the day. That's completely disjuncted them or separated them from the regulation of spiritual life. So anyway, we see there are many bad influences in modern society, and all based on making more money. But actually, people previous to this modern time, they were not interested in making more money. They were interested in making more spiritual advancement and teaching their children to grow up with these values of regulation, respect for elders and family members, respect for seniors, respect for holy men. So if a child respects their parents, then it's very easy for them to respect seniors. It's very easy for them to respect spiritual persons, and it's very easy for them to respect God and be, let's say, a person dedicated to serving God without any material motive. So that was the purpose of life. That was the culture that was being practiced by the people. And because of that, people would attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Today, that whole ethos, or that whole culture of spiritual achievement has been disrupted by modern civilization and its preoccupation with materialism. Now, the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to bring us back to that simple way of life in which we actually have time for spiritual life. We have time to teach our children the values of Sanatan Dharma. So in this verse, Krishna is beginning to explain to Arjuna the culture of spirituality. And that begins by understanding that we have an eternal soul. Without understanding we have an eternal soul, an eternal relationship with God or with Krishna, we never can see through the illusion of life means material opulence, and life means engaging that opulence in selfish activities or self-indulgence. We can't separate ourselves from that false concept unless we realize first that we have an eternal soul, and the soul is different than the body. As soon as we identify with the body and not with the soul, we become trapped by the illusory, let's say, enticements of Maya. Maya is a person, or Durga Mata, and her goal is to teach us that we're doing the wrong things in the material world. But how does she do that? She entices us with false concepts that puts us in a dilemma. Just like when a person is convinced that drinking alcohol is fun or smoking a cigarette is fun because then they can socially be connected to a whole bunch of other people that smoke and drink, that's called Maya. That's an illusion. And if you look at our panels over there, you'll see the middle panel is an explanation of what happens when people engage in the 4 self-destructive activities that is part of the culture today. What are those 4 self-destructive qualities? They are intoxication, meat eating, illicit sex, and gambling. This has become part of the culture, although 5,000 years ago, Krishna explained, don't do these things. He clearly explained that one should not eat meat, one should not engage in any type of intoxication, including coffee and tea, and one should not philander outside of marriage, and one should not gamble or speculate. Gambling means you're betting your money. Like, for example, somebody will bet that the stock market goes up, and another person will bet that the stock market goes down. Now, one thing we don't understand is when your bet is when you're betting the wrong way, you're betting that it goes up, but it actually goes down. You lose money, and somebody else gains money. And if you bet the other way, that the stock market is going up, or the stock market is going down, but it goes up, you lose money and somebody else gains money. So you see this more carefully in a casino. When you go to a casino, you put your chips on a certain bet and you lose, you see that all your chips are going to the casino. See? But the same thing is happening on the stock market. When somebody loses money, somebody else is gaining that money. See? So therefore, it's not a good thing to gamble because basically you're throwing your money away. And it's not a good thing to take intoxication because basically you're ruining your health. And it's not a good thing to philander because you'll be in a dilemma. We see many times famous people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and others, they're philanderers and they get caught and then they're shamed in public and then they feel some type of remorse or they get a divorce or whatever. So these are very bad habits, but they've become part of the culture today, although Krishna warned us 5,000 years ago, don't do this. So then we have the statistics to prove that what he said is true. And if you look at the panel there, every year almost 900,000 people die of overdoses of taking drugs. And there's a whole list of drugs. Some of them are legal, some of them are illegal. Also, every year in the United States, so many people die because of addiction to sexual addiction. So you have people dying of AIDS, people dying of other, what you call STIs, sexually transmitted infections. You have AIDS, you have also syphilis and so many other things. So these are all horrible things. And according to the teachings of Krishna, there are 4 universal principles of spirituality. One is cleanliness, another is truthfulness, and another one is uh, the cleanliness, truthfulness, austerity or self-control, and mercy. Mercy is destroyed by intoxication. Truthfulness is destroyed by gambling and speculation. Okay, and austerity, or the ability to self-control, is destroyed by the false ego and false ideas that come from the false ego, such as animals don't have a soul, therefore you can kill them and eat them. These are false ideas that mislead people in life. And finally, the truthfulness is destroyed by gambling and speculation. Okay, so these four principles, universal principles of spirituality, are compromised by these bad habits. Therefore, in previous times, people understood this and they avoided these bad habits. And that is something that we must not only do ourselves, but teach our children also, not to engage in these bad habits, because it ruins one's life. So, by understanding that we have a spirit, eternal soul, then Krishna says, Matras parsastu konteya stitos nastukudukadaha agama payano nityas tamstatikshasva bharata. Hey Arjuna, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O Arjuna, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So being able to tolerate difficult situations is something that comes naturally when one cultivates spiritual life. But if one is cultivating only material principles in life, their toleration level is very low, and therefore they get mad very easily, therefore they become violent sometimes, and they ruin their relationships with family members and with outside people and work relationships and so forth. So learning to tolerate things is absolutely important, because there are always going to be good and bad things that happen in life. We cannot expect that we will always be successful, because the whole let's say, force of nature is, as soon as you're born, you begin to die. There's birth, old age, and disease and death. Therefore, everyone is materially going to fail at one time or another. And we have to be able to tolerate these things, because failure is not losing your money or losing your house or losing a job. Failure is losing the opportunity to become God conscious. That's the real failure in life. Because if you become God conscious and you begin to hear Bhagavad Gita, you develop very good qualities such as perseverance, such as self-control, such as regulated lifestyle, such as being compassionate and being empathetic, and such as developing qualities of mercifulness and so forth. So it's important that we cultivate spiritual life along with material life to balance things off, so that we do not become subject to lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy, and madness. These six qualities take over on our life, and we become very easily angry and frustrated and feel as if we have been violated by in our work, or violated in our relationships with family members, etc., and we ruin our relationships, basically. So we see sometimes someone loses their job, they get a gun, and they go into their workplace and they kill people. You read it in the newspaper. It happens a lot in the United States. Why? Because they don't have any ability to self-control and to tolerate difficult situations. So therefore, this verse is saying, look, just like there's summer and fall and winter and spring, everything is going to be temporary in this material world. So if there's winter, eventually it turns into spring. And if there's spring, eventually it turns into summer. And if there's summer, it'll eventually turn into fall. And fall will eventually turn into winter again. So you have to learn to be patient. You cannot think that everything has to be exactly the way I want it. Because we are not independent. We are completely dependent on God. The idea that we are independent is a false idea. And the proof is we're subject to birth, old age, disease, and death. So, therefore, Krishna is saying one must learn to tolerate the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress. Now, that's something that's almost impossible for people to accept today. But when you do read Bhagavad Gita, you learn what are the fundamental principles to have a genuinely successful life. And what is real success? At least at the moment of death, you should remember Krishna, and then you're liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So how do you remember Krishna at the moment of death? It's by practicing your whole life, remembering Krishna. So that is the original culture of India. And you'll see, you go to India and still you see temples that were built thousands of years ago. Why? And how were those temples built? Some of them took many, many years, sometimes lifetimes, to build, such as Srirangam, such as Madurai, such as Tirupati, and such as Kanchipuram, and such as Mount Abu. All these places have amazingly constructed architecture that people spent sometimes lifetimes building. Why? Because their most concentration was how to establish and maintain their relationship with God. Today, they build baseball and football and basketball stadiums and football stadiums that can hold maybe 50,000, 100,000 people, right? They're much bigger buildings than the churches and the mosques and the temples, and more people go to those places than they do to the holy places nowadays. So you see how there's a shift of culture. Previously, people were interested mainly in living a simple life and cultivating their relationship with God through devotion and dedication. Today, most people are interested in making a lot of money and spending it on gadgets and cars and boats and vacations and houses and this thing and that thing. So there's nothing wrong with that if you have the balance of spiritual life with it. But if you don't have that balance, then you go completely off the rails of the purpose of human life, and you miss the opportunity to attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. So I'll stop right there. There's much more to say. I only covered 2 verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Imagine if we went through all the verses of Bhagavad Gita, all the knowledge that would be available to have a successful spiritual life, and also be able to raise your kids to grow up with the same values that Krishna is espousing here in Bhagavad Gita, and therefore giving everyone a chance to actually remember Krishna at the moment of death and solve the problem of birth, death, old age, and disease. So I'll stop right there. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask? Every Sunday we have Bhagavad Gita class. Every day we have Bhagavad Gita class. You can hear our classes on the YouTube. You don't even have to come here. But it's very important to have a balance between material life and spiritual life. If that balance is mostly material life, very little spiritual life, we will definitely become illusioned by Maya and go off into a direction of losing the opportunity to remember Krishna at the moment of death, and therefore being, let's say, forced to take birth again and start all over. And no guarantee of what our next body is going to be. Hare Krishna. So if you have a question, you can ask it now.
Just for the benefit, what's the So, for the benefit of all of us, so how do we, what is a simple process to follow to maintain that balance?
Well, when Lord Chaitanya appeared 500 years ago, he made it very simple. You chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You eat Mahaprasadam by cooking vegetarian food with no onion or garlic and offering it to Krishna in a small altar. It can be in your kitchen or it can be in a special room. And then Krishna offers it back as his prasad or his mercy. And therefore that purifies our body and mind, as well as chanting Hare Krishna, which purifies our speaking and our mind also. And then regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita, that purifies our mind and our whole emotional life. And then engaging in acts of devotion on a regular basis, like coming to the temple, associating with devotees, and engaging in bhakti or devotional service. That purifies us also. So the whole idea is to purify the material conception of life that has become the culture today and replace it with the spiritual culture of love and devotion for God. This is very simple. It's chanting, dancing, feasting, and listening to Bhagavad Gita. And you only have to learn this one book. You don't have to read anything else. Bhagavad Gita is the quintessential knowledge of the entire Vedic culture. If we learn this one book, you have everything, you have all the knowledge necessary to avoid being fooled by the illusory representations in the material world and being always staying on the path of devotion and love for God. So it's not difficult. It's very easy. It's been made easy by Lord Chaitanya. But people think, oh, that's too easy. Give me something harder to do. But that's nonsense. We don't need something harder to do. We can't even barely do this, which is easy. So let's just stick to what is the path of least resistance. That's called being smart. Always taking the path of least resistance. So the path of least resistance is Krishna consciousness. You chant, you dance, you take nice prasad, and you hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. You associate with devotees. You engage in devotional activities such as Sankirtan, Harinam Sankirtan, and festivals. It's all fun. It's all easy to do. It's not difficult. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this, you see. But the idea is you have to have the time to do it. So you do have the time. Everybody has between 2 to 4 hours a day for spiritual life. How do we calculate that? Let's say you sleep 8 to 10 hours a day. Actually, you shouldn't sleep more than 6 hours a day if you're healthy. But some people, let's say they sleep 10 hours a day. And then they work another, let's say 12 hours a day. Okay, so 10 and 12 is what? 22. It says 4 hours left, right? Now, if you waste the time on the cell phone, you waste the time on the internet, you waste the time going to the Bhangra in a bar in Bellevue, of course, you don't have any time that way. But if you avoid those things, and then you still have approximately 4 hours for spiritual life. See? But you have to be regulated. Regulation is what differentiates an animal from a human being. The animals are regulated, but only for sense gratification. When you become regulated for spiritual life, you become a human being. And if you don't do that, then you're actually a two-legged animal, just engaged in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. If you regulate yourself for spiritual life, you become a real human being, and you're beginning to develop all the qualities that are necessary and all the practices that are necessary to always remember Krishna in every moment of life, and especially at the most important moment of life, which is the moment of death. The real success is to remember Krishna at the moment of death. Look at the history of Ajamil. He, in a sense, you could say, accidentally remembered Krishna or Narayana at the moment of death. And even though he was a very sinful man, all his sins were eradicated, and he went back to Godhead eventually. He had what's called a second chance to purify himself and then go back to Godhead. So the moment of death is the most glorious moment in the life of a devotee, and it's the worst moment for the materialist. You see how there's diametrical difference between the materialist and the devotee. What they consider the worst thing is actually the best thing for the devotee who's prepared themselves. Just like a test. Let's say you're going to take an SAT test, but you haven't studied for it. That can be the worst experience for a kid, right? Because they can't answer all the questions. But if you're prepared for it, it's the best moment, and you feel confident because you knew all the answers. You prepared for it. So life is like that. We must prepare for the moment of death. And it's a lifetime of preparation. Okay? But it's very easy now. You sing Hare Krishna. You dance Hare Krishna. You eat Krishna Prasadam, Hare Krishna. You associate with devotees, Hare Krishna. You engage in devotional service, Hare Krishna. All easy things to do. You don't have to be, like I said, a rocket engineer. You can be illiterate and do these things and still be successful in life. Okay. Hare Krishna. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
My question is about yoga.
Yes.
So a lot of people.
Well, first of all, let me ask you a question. Do you know what yoga means?
Yoga is a kind of a combination of both mind and body.
Of what?
Combination of mind and body.
No. That's not what yoga is. Yoga is connecting with God.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with combination of mind and body. Okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead now.
So we do a lot of like yoga day and the meditations, right? So a lot of activities are there, right, to perform. So are they related to spiritual or they're completely unrelated?
Well, if you think that the definition of yoga is to connect the mind and the body, it's a waste of time. All the yoga that you do, complete waste of time. Right? You may as well go to a casino and gamble. You know, that might be even better than doing all that yoga because that's it's strenuous to do it. It's easy to go to a casino and lose your money. You know, that's a lot easier. Or even better, just open a window and throw your money out. You know, the window. But no, that's a waste of time because that's not the meaning of yoga. Here's the meaning of yoga. It's the 6th chapter. See, whenever you ask a question, if I can show you where that question is answered by Krishna, that's a real answer. If I say, well, I think it may be this, it may be that, that's nonsense. So the real answer to your question is the 6th chapter, 47th verse of Bhagavad Gita, which says, Yoginam api sarvasam madgatanantaratmana shadavam bhajate yogam same yuktatamo mata. It says, and of all the yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, meaning Krishna, thinks of me, meaning Krishna, within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, meaning Krishna, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all yogis. That is my opinion. So this is the answer to your question. The whole purpose of yoga is connecting to Krishna and being always in relationship to Krishna and offering all your love and your service and your thoughts and your desires to please the Lord. It's not that give me this, give me that. You know, Janam Dehi, Rupam Dehi, Dhanam Dehi, give me, give me, give me. That's not yoga. Yoga is, I offer to you, Lord, my love, my good wishes, my everything in my life. See? So this is, of all the yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in Krishna, meaning is always engaged in relationship to Krishna and all their activities, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So to answer your question, is the 6th chapter, 47th verse of Bhagavad Gita. And there's a whole purport, there's a whole commentary explaining this in much more detail. Okay?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
But the
Krishna.
current world, no one is taking that consideration, right? What you
Right
said.
now, they're not doing yoga. They're doing exercises, right? Physical and mental exercises leading to nowhere. It's just like a bridge to nowhere. Sometimes these members of Congress, they get, $45 million to build a bridge. So they build the bridge to nowhere. When you go across the bridge, there's nothing there. It's an island with nothing, right? So a bridge to nowhere, you spend so much money, you spend so much time, and you end up nowhere. That's what's happening with this modern yoga, hot yoga, this yoga, that yoga, Raja yoga, this type of yoga. This is all a waste of time because they don't understand what yoga means. Just like I asked you right away, I said, what do you understand by yoga? And you tell me something that is not related to yoga. That's what's going on today. Haribol.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Any other
I have
questions?
also one question.
Yes, sir.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, how to come out of this comparative mindset and the rat race, like whether in the office, whether in friends?
Yeah.
How to come out of that comparative
You
mindset?
get out of that by coming here and listening to the class on a regular basis. Listening to Bhagavad Gita. This is the way out of that trap. See, just like you set up a trap to catch a rat, and the rat comes in and they smell some cheese or something or peanut butter, and they say, there's something to eat. And as soon as they touch it, the trap catches them and they choke to death. See? So by going to places where there is a trap, so the trap is intoxication, meat eating, gambling, and illicit sex. Those are the 4 traps. As soon as you go there, you get caught. And it's almost impossible to get out. And then, because you no longer have control of yourself, you get angry with your own family members. You get into arguments with your own family members, right? And or with co-workers, or you have road rage, or you get angry at someone you don't even know, right? This is happening every day. Sometimes people are killed over a fight for the joystick of the television or some game. Sometimes the son kills the mother because she won't let him have the, the remote control. Have you ever read articles like that in the newspaper? Right? You see how dangerous it is not to have control of your mind and senses. You can kill someone for something completely useless, such as having the control of the remote control for the television. You see, it's very dangerous not being Krishna conscious. So to answer your question, you come here and hear Bhagavad Gita on a regular basis. Any other questions? Anybody? Yes. Yes, sir. Sorry, you have to come all the way up here.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
So how we can realize, are we spiritually progressing? If we are chanting Hare Krishna every day, or we're trying to develop that personal connection with Krishna, how one can understand if they are progressing or not?
Because you will then be able to control illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, intoxication. You'll be able to control anger, lust, greed, moha, illusion, enviousness, and crazy behavior. You'll be able to control all those things. That means you are making advancement spiritually. If you can't control any of those things, or even one of those things, your advancement is very, very slow or non-existent. Okay? But you be able to control those things, that means that you're making serious spiritual advancement, because now your main preoccupation in your mind is how to please Krishna. So that's the most fundamental question to ask us. Before you make a decision to do something, you should ask yourself, is this going to please Krishna and Guru, or is it not going to please Krishna and Guru? Now, if Krishna told you, as he's saying in Bhagavad Gita, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakta prayachati tadham bhakti aparatam asnami prayatat manaha. Offer me with love and devotion a leaf, water, fruit, and flower, and I'll accept it. So he didn't say, offer me a sirloin steak and a hot dog or a hamburger. He didn't say that. So he's saying, vegetables, fruits, grains, milk, those are the things that he'll accept if it's offered. Now, it doesn't mean he needs those things. Those are simple things that he will accept if you offer with love and devotion. The thing he's looking for is the love and devotion, not the chawal or the dal. Although he'll accept those things, but along with that should be your love and devotion. So when you actually have love and devotion for Krishna, you have advanced spiritually, and you avoid all those bad habits. Okay? Hare Krishna. Any other questions? This is your chance to ask a question that you've never been satisfied with the answer before. Okay, now we'll have Arti. Hare Krishna. Those were all very good questions. The whole Vedic knowledge is taught by questions and answers. The whole Bhagavad Gita is questions and answers. The entire Padma Purana is questions and answers. The entire Mahabharata is questions and answers. The whole Vedic literature is questions and answers. Without the questions, you never get the answers. Hari Bol. Jayo Jaya Gora Chande Arati Ke Soba. Jayo Jaya Gora Chande Arati Ke Soba. Jayo Jaya Gora Chande Arati Ke Soba. Jayo Jayo Gora Chande Arati Ke Soba. Jana Vitatavane Jagamana Loba. Gorangera Rotik Soba Jagajana Manaloba. Gorangera Rotik Soba Jagajana Manaloba. Gorangera Rotik Soba Jagajana Manaloba. Gaurangera Radhike Shoba Jagajana Manaloba. Jagajana Manaloba. Jagajana Manaloba. Kibadaki na chingo ni rachan panme Kibadaki ni taya chan banmen gadat hara. Kibadaki ni taya chan banmen gadat hara. Nikate Advaita Shini Vasachatra-dara
Ekate Advaita-drini Vasachatra-dara
Gorangera Rutik Soba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Radike Joba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Rutik Soba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Radike Joba Jagajana Manaloba
Kibaboshi na Chingoracha Ratna Singha-sane
Imamosi Ade Gauraja Ratna Simhasane
Arati Korena Brahma Adideva Gane
Arati Gorena Brahma Adi Devagane
Gorangera Rutik Soba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Radike Joba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangira Rutik Soba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Radike Joba Jagajana Manaloba
Kibanarari Adhikari Chamaradulaya
Ivanarari Adi Gori Jamaradulaya
Sanjaya Mukunda Vasu Gosa Adigaya
Jaya Mukunda Badu Godadigaya
Gorangera Rutik Soba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Radike Joba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Rutik Soba Jagajana Manaloba
Gorangera Radike Joba Jagajana Manaloba
Kibashanka Kuntur Nanta Baje Baje Karatalala
Shivajanga Vaje Ganda Vaje Vaje Garadala
Madhura Mitanga Baje Paramarasala
Madhura Mrudanga Vaje Paramaratala
Shanka Baje Ganta Baje Madhur 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 Baje
Baje Ganda Baje Madhur 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 Baje
Bolo Shanka Baje Ganta Baje Madhur 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 Baje
Ganga Baje Ganda Baje Madhur 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 Baje
Bola Shanka baje, ganta baje. Madur, madur, madur baje. Madur, 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 madur baje. Madur, 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 madur baje. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Ki Baba ho Koti Chandra Jini Vadana Ujvala. Gala deshe bana mala, kore jala mala. Shanka baje, ganta baje, Madur, Madur, Madur baje.
Ganga baje, ganda baje, Madur, Madur, Madur baje.
Bola Shanka baje, ganta baje, Madur, Madur, Madur baje.
Ganga baje, ganda baje,
Madur, Madur, Madur baje.
Madur, Madur, Madur baje.
Kiba Shiva Sukha Narada Preme Gada Gada.
Shiva, Shiva, Shukanarada,
Shiva Shiva Sukha Narada Preme Gadadhara
Shiva Shiva Shukalarada Preme Gadagada
Akati Vinoda Deke Gorara Sampada
Akati Vinoda Deke Gorara Sampada
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare
Hey Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare
Hey Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare
Hey Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Oh Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare
Hey Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Premanandi ki jai. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajacha Astatara Satarishi Shishimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasdi Gaur Bhaktivinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Mayapura Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samavera Bhaktivinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Haribo. Namaste Narasimhaya Pralada Dayini. Namaste Narasimhaya Pralada Dayini.
Namaste Narasimhaya Pralada Dayini.
Hiranyakashipur Vakshahai.
Hiranyakashipur Vakshahai.
Hiranyakashipur Vakshahai.
Hiranyakashipur Vakshahai.
Yato yato yami tato nrsimha.
Yato yato yami tato nrsimha.
Ito Nishinga Parato Nishinga
Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha
Yato Yato Yami Tato Nishinga
Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsimha
Pahi Nishinga Hidaye Nishinga
Pahi Narsimha Hridaye Narsimha
Narashina Madim Sharanam Prapade
Narsimha Madim Sharanam Prapade
Tavakara Kamala Bare Nakam Adbhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bingam Keshavajita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Tavakara Kamala Varenakam Adhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Danu Bingam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Keshavajita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Jagadesha Hare Jaya Narasingade Jaya Narasingade Jaya Narasingade Jaya Narasingade
Jaya Narsimhadev Jaya Narsimhadev Jaya Narsimhadev Jaya Narsimhadev
Jaya Narasingade Jaya Narasingade Jaya Narasingade Jaya Narasingade
Jaya Narsimhadev Jaya Narsimhadev Jaya Narsimhadev Jaya Narsimhadev
Hari Bol Hari Bol Gora Hari Bol Nitai Gora Hari Bol Nitai Gora
Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol
Shingadev Bhagavan Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan. Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan.
Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan.
Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan.
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 Kalindi Yamuna Jaya Jaya Mahavan.
Oh, Kalindi Jamuna Jaya Jaya Mahavan.
Jaya Mahavan, Jaya Mahavan.
Jaya Mahavan, Jaya
Jaya
Mahavan.
Mahavan, Jaya Mahavan.
Jai Mahavan, Jai Mahavan.
Kalindi Yamuna Jaya Jaya Mahavan.
Kalindi Jamuna Jaya Jaya Mahavan.
Keshi Gata Vamsi Vata Dwadasa Kanan.
Shigata Vamsi Vata Swadasha Kanan.
Keshi Gata Vamsi Vata Dwadasa Kanan.
Shigata Vamsi Gata Swadasha Kanan.
Jaha Sabha Lila Koilo Shinanda Nandan.
Jaha Sabalila Koilo Shinanda Nandan.
Shinanda Nandan, Shinanda Nandan.
Shinanda Nandan, Shinanda Nandan.
Shinanda Nandan, Shinanda Nandan.
Srinanda Nandan, Srinanda Nandan.
Jaha Sabha Lila Koilo Shinanda Nandan.
Jahasabalila Koilo Srinanda Nandan.
Shinanda Yasoda Jaya Jaya Gopagan.
Srinanda Yasoda Jaya Jaya Gopagan.
Shinanda Yasoda Jaya Jaya Gopagan.
Srinanda Yasoda Jaya Jaya Gopagan.
Shridamadi Jaya Jaya Dhenu Vatsagan.
Sridamadi Jaya Jaya Dhenu Vatsagan.
Shino Vatsagan, Dhenu Vatsagan, Dhenu Vatsagan, Dhenu Vatsagan, Dhenu Vatsagan, Dhenu Vatsagan.
Dhenu Vatsagan, Dhenu Vatsagan.
Shridamadi Jaya Jaya Dhenu Vatsagan.
Sridamadi Jaya Jaya Dhenu Vatsagan.
Jaya Vrishabhanu Jaya Kirtida Sundari.
Jaya Vrishabhanu Jaya Kirtida Sundari.
Jaya Vrishabhanu Jaya Jaya Kirtida Sundari.
Vrishabhanu Jaya Kirtida Sundari.
Jaya Purnamasi Jaya Abhira Nagari.
Jaya Purnamati Jaya Aviranagari.
Jaya Jaya Viratnagari Jaya Viranagari. Jaya Abhiranagari Jaya Abhinagari. Jaya Purnamasi Jaya Abira Nagari
Jaya Purnamasi Jaya Abira Nagari
Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavana
Jaya Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavana
Jaya Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavana
Jaya Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavana
Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Dvijara
Oh Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Vijara
Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Dvijara Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Dvijara Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Dvijara
Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Vijara
Jaya Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavana
Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavana
Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Dvijara
Jaya Krishna Sakha Batu Vijara
Jaya Rama Jaya Rama Gata Jaya Rohini Nandan
Jaya Rama Gata Jaya Rohini Nandan
Jaya Rama Gata Jaya Rohini Nandan Jaya Jaya Vrindavasi Jata Jan Jaya Dvija Patni Jaya Naga Kanyagan Bhakti Teja Hara Pailo Govinda Charan Govinda Charan Govinda Charan
Govinda Charan Govinda Charan
Bolo Govinda Charan Govinda Charan
Govinda Charan Govinda Charan
Bhakti Teja Hara Pailo Govinda Charan Shirasa Mandala Jaya Jaya Radha Sham Shirada Mandala Jaya Jaya Radha Sham Jaya Jaya Rasa Lila Sarva Manuram Jaya Shirasa Mandala Jaya Jaya Radha Sham Jaya Jaya Rasa Lila Sarva Manuram Jaya Jaya Ujwala Rasa Sarva Rasa Sar Parakiya Bhaveja Bhajate Prachar Shri Janava Pada Padma Kuriya Smaran Dina Krishna Dase Kohe Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Hey Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Nama Sankirtan Jayo Radhe Jaya Krishna Jayo Vrindavan.
Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan.
Bolo Jayo Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan.
Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan.
Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan.
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 Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan.
Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan.
Bolo Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan.
Madana Mohan, Madana Mohan.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gora Premanande Ki Jai. So this is a beautiful bhajan. It is leading everybody on parikram of Vrindavan. So if you understand the meaning of what's being said, you're going all over Vrindavan and hearing all the glories of Vrindavan Dhamma. Haribol. Yeah. What? Okay. Whose birthday is it? Who's that? Who is that? Okay, let him come up. Let him come here. So the words to this song say, all glories to Radha and Krishna and the divine forest of Vrindavana. All glories to the three presiding deities of Vrindavana, Shri Govinda, Shri Gopinath, and Shri Madan Mohan. All glories to Shamakunda, Radhakunda, Govardhan Hill, and the Yamuna River, Kalindi. All glories to the great forest known as Mahavan, where Krishna and Balaram displayed all of their childhood pastimes. All glories to Keshi, where Krishna killed the Keshi demon. All glories to the Vamsivata tree, where Krishna attracted all the gopis to come by playing his flute. Glories to all the 12 forests of Raja. All these places, the son of Nanda, Shri Krishna performed all of his pastimes. So you see, this is parikram of Vrindavan. You see how beautiful the Vaishnava acharyas have written poetry that encompasses the highest principles of spiritual life and spiritual ecstasy. So we are very fortunate to be able to sing these bhajans and to associate with Vrindavan and Radha and Krishna. Gaura Premanandi Haribol. So we have a birthday today. The way we celebrate birthdays is by chanting our favorite song, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Bolo Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You play. You play the cartels. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hey Bolo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hey, bolo Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hey bolo, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Gaur Premanandi ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Bhagavad Gita Grantaraj ki jai, Shrimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hari 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 Bol. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol. Thank you very much. And we will continue more and more, but not tonight. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Our whole life is kirtan. This is called kirtan ras, nectar of the holy name. Haribo, thank you.
First time I can see them. That's coming from
We want to see Krishna all the time. Then we're happy. We don't want politics. We don't want war. We don't want hatred, lust, greed, all bad things. I don't know how people can live with these things. They go crazy.
But grace of you or God, that addiction should come towards it. Keep them on the
I want